Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and in this episode, we are going to be doing something a little bit different. So, this is a very special episode, as the kids used to say. There's no guest. It's just me, just Jeremiah getting a little bit in his feelings, getting a little bit in deep on a news story that's been going around recently that I really feel the need to talk about. This is something that I wish I didn't have to talk about, but we're going to talk about at some length because, well, to be frank, it's something that pisses me off a lot. And it angers me. And it saddens me, and I hope it pisses you off too. And I hate that we have to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it. So I want to start this episode with a quote from Jean-Paul Sartre about anti-Semitism. Now, this episode is not about anti-Semitism, but you'll understand why we're doing this once we get there. Sartre had this very famous quote about the nature of anti-Semites. About how unserious they are at a fundamental level. And he said, "Never believe that the anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge. But they're amusing themselves, for it's their adversary who's obliged to use words responsibly, because he believes in words. The anti-Semites who don't believe in words have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of the arguments. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and to disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past." Sartre said this about anti-Semites and how they don't feel obligated to actually make strong arguments. They don't feel obligated to be serious and factual. And today's episode is not about anti-Semitism, but it is relevant as a quote. Today, we are talking about the lie that went viral that Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, are stealing people's pets. They're stealing people's cats and dogs and eating them. This story is about Haitian immigrants instead of about Jews, but the same principle applies. Over the last week or two, conservative America has worked itself into a frenzy over this lie that Haitian refugees are stealing people's pet cats and barbecuing them. It's genuinely disgusting to me that this is a thing that we're talking about. But if you haven't been following it, here's the background. Springfield, Ohio, is a city of about 80,000 people, I believe. That includes a few thousand recently arrived Haitian migrants, almost all of whom, by the way, are legal immigrants. They are part of a program that has given refugee status to Haitians fleeing the economic conditions and the regime there, the political violence and instability in Haiti. This is not a crowd of illegal immigrants. Virtually all of these Haitian immigrants, I can't speak for every single one, but virtually all of them are here legally. Their paperwork is in order. And many of them have gone to Springfield, Ohio, and they moved there mostly not because the government dropped them there, but because there were jobs available in Springfield, and they heard about it. And once a few Haitians landed there, they told other Haitians, hey, there's a lot of jobs here, and kind of a snowball effect occurred. As a side note, you may have seen the phrase 20,000 Haitians thrown around in a city of 60,000 people. That does not seem to be the case. That I've found no reliable source for that. That number does not appear to have a factual basis. My best efforts at detective work have led me to believe it's probably somewhere more like 5 to 10,000 Haitians rather than 20,000. But regardless, there is a community there in the thousands. So, a few weeks ago, a video appeared of a black woman killing a cat in a driveway. This video was recorded. It spread all over the internet. Now, this video was recorded in Canton, Ohio, which is a different place than Springfield, Ohio. It is something like 175 miles away. It is not the same place. The woman in question is also not a Haitian migrant. She is an American citizen who was born in America, is not Haitian. She's just black, I guess, which for some people in the conservative movement is maybe that's enough. I don't know that conservatives care to distinguish between the different kinds of black people. I literally think that's about the level of sophistication we're working with here, unfortunately. Regardless of the fact that this did not happen in Springfield, did not involve a Haitian person, the video rapidly made its way through conservative social media and conservative online circles. And the line attached to it was, Haitians are stealing and eating your pets. This claim initially was being pushed by explicit neo-Nazis. And I want to say again, this is not the kind of thing where, oh, you just call everyone you don't like a Nazi. No, this was, there are people who have showed up at Springfield City Council, the Springfield City Commission meetings, and they say, I am concerned about these Haitians eating our pets. And it turns out that guy is a member of the neo-Nazi group Blood Tribe. And the name he gave at the city council hearing was Nate Higgers. And it's disgusting, and I'll let you figure out what that rhymes with, because it's not subtle, but that's the level of person we're talking about. That kind of neo-Nazi asshole is the one who basically was the original pusher of this lie. About 2 to 3 weeks ago is when it started. That's who, that's where it started. And of course, nobody in the conservative movement has an immune system against neo-Nazi bullshit. They do not have an immune system against it. So it goes from the actual neo-Nazis into kind of alt-right personalities who gleefully spread this complete lie. And then from the alt-right, it goes into kind of the shock jock right, the Joe Rogan, the Brett Weinstein, the podcast bro right. And from there, it goes to actual Republican politicians, including ultimately the former president, Donald Trump, and his vice presidential running mate, J.D. Vance. None of them have any immune system against neo-Nazi propaganda, so it's very easy for it to spread. There was also another photo that was sometimes attached to this, by the way, of literally just a black man on the side of the road holding a goose. It appears like he's holding a dead goose. Again, this appears to have nothing to do with Springfield or Haitians or pets. This was a photo that was taken in Columbus, Ohio, something like 4 months ago. Does not involve anything that we're talking about here. But hey, it's a picture of a black person holding an animal. So I guess if you can conjure up any picture of a black person holding a dead animal anywhere in the state of Ohio, that's what, I don't know. It's just ridiculous nonsense that's being attached to this. But nonetheless, the lie that Haitians are eating cats spread like wildfire through conservative circles, especially on Twitter, especially on Elon Musk's Twitter, which is now a right-wing propaganda hellhole. Musk himself tweeted about it several times. Donald Trump, who at this point is 99% fake tan and seething rage and conspiracy theories, ranted about it at the actual presidential debate. He said, they're eating our dogs and they're eating our cats and they're eating our pets. And he ranted about this at the debate. But perhaps the most pathetic take came from J.D. Vance. And, look, we're going to talk about J.D. Vance here. There's a lot of things we could talk about. We could talk about how America was founded on the idea of immigration. We are a nation of immigrants, more so than almost any country in the world. Other countries are also founded by immigrants, but very few as explicitly as America, and very few really wrote it into our national DNA the way that America has. I could talk about Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty that says, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. It doesn't say, give me the smartest people in your society, and I'll gladly steal them, because it's great to have the cool, smart people live in our country. I'm not against that. That seems like a good idea to me, but that's not what the poem says. The poem says, give me your poor, your tired. And that's what a lot of our ancestors used to be. The wretched refuse of our teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I could talk about that. I could talk about how Haitian immigrants, especially the ones in the legal refugee program, have lower rates of crime than native-born Americans. That would be an interesting thing to talk about. Not going to mention that, though. I could talk about it. I could also talk about how Haitian Americans, despite having come from dramatic circumstances, that involve ridiculous levels of poverty and disease and malnutrition and poor education, sometimes non-existent education, how despite all these challenges that they face in their home country, they earn only a tiny amount less than the average American. The average American household earns $75,000 in 2022. The average Haitian American household earned $65,000. So this is not a population that is all, in dire poverty. It's slightly less than average, which, given the ridiculous circumstances they come from, seems to me to be doing pretty damn well. I could talk about how the actual native white residents of Springfield mostly say that they love having the Haitians there. Especially the ones in charge, the mayor, the city planner, think that the Haitians have saved their city. The business owners there seem to be pretty in favor of it. There's interviews that have been done with factory owners in Springfield, Ohio, who say, yeah, I employed 20 or 30 Haitian guys, and I wish I had 30 more, because they're reliable workers and they show up on time and they're responsible, and I love them. I'll take more. I could talk about that. I could talk about Springfield's history. How Springfield in 2013 or 2014, roughly a decade ago, Springfield was the kind of city that got put on those lists of the most depressing place in America. Springfield was a dying, decaying, deindustrializing town. One of the many places across the Midwest, that has suffered from deindustrialization, from the flight of manufacturing jobs, that just, essentially had no future. Nothing was happening there. Population was leaving and declining, and it's one of many towns like that. And I could talk about how they very deliberately tried to attract immigrants, and it worked. And they attracted more immigrants now, and now they are not declining. Immigration saved Springfield. Its population is going up now, and now they have lots of jobs. And in fact, they probably need more immigrants because there is a shortage of workers in Springfield. I could talk about that, about how good immigration has been for Springfield, how it saved a city that was decaying and dying. I could talk about how this vile, racist garbage grew and metastasized like a cancer on Elon Musk's Twitter, which is now just a hellhole of a website because Twitter is now an explicit project to promote far-right politics because Elon Musk has brainworms. I could talk about that. But like I said, what I really want to talk about is J.D. Vance in particular, and J.D. Vance's cynicism, because it's just too much. Vance is the perfect example of Jean Paul Sartre's anti-Semite in the quote that we referenced at the beginning of the episode. And again, this is not about Jewish people. It's not about actual anti-Semitism, but it's about the process that Sartre described. J.D. Vance knows that he's acting in bad faith. He's acknowledged several times that he basically knows the rumors are not true. And then he defends them anyways. He does not feel obligated to take truth seriously. He does not feel obligated to take rationality and having a serious discussion seriously. He delights in poking fun at liberals who accuse him of lying. Oh, you think I'm lying? You know what? Are you triggered, lib? You know, there was one tweet where he said something like, I don't know if this is true, but blah, 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 and then justify it, and then literally like 5 paragraphs of trash justifying it anyway. After he said, he opens with, I don't even know if this is true. 5 paragraphs of trash, and then concludes, so patriots, keep the cat memes coming, referring to memes about how immigrants eat cats, how they're going to steal your pet and eat your cat, which is just racist garbage. And J.D. Vance, again, acknowledges, I have no idea if this is true, but it makes the libs upset. So keep doing it, patriots. Keep the memes coming. This is a guy who, in a year's time could be a heartbeat away from the presidency. And Donald Trump, an 80-year-old's heartbeat away from the presidency. And he talks like he's a bad imitation of an alt-right YouTuber. He gleefully spreads lies just because it pisses you and me off. He knows better, but he delights in acting in bad faith because he's not obligated to be serious. He thinks we are obligated to be serious, but he is not. He is cruel because the cruelty is the point. This is also a man who, in years past, fully acknowledged how awful Donald Trump was. At some point during the early days of Donald Trump's rise, before he had won the nomination in 2016, when he was just a candidate, J.D. Vance said he might be Hitler. Those are J.D. Vance's words. And yet he cynically surrenders to the guy who might be Hitler because it will help him get a taste of power. There is no boot that J.D. Vance will not lick if it gets him closer to power. That is his ideal. J.D. Vance has even written about how the Republican Party needs to wake up and stop being so racist, and how it's awful that the Republican Party says they want to deport 12 million people. He wrote that in the 2010s, before he became a Republican senator, before he sold his soul. Now he says he's fully on board with Donald Trump's plan to deport 15 to 20 million people. What changed? Access to power. Because there is no principle that he won't abandon for the sake of power. I also want to give a shout out here to Chris Rufo, another really cynical asshole who should know better, but does it out of cynical, personal, selfish gains that he can get out of the situation. He's another one of the most disgusting people in American politics. Chris Rufo is a conservative provocateur, I guess. He offered a cash reward, $5,000, for any evidence of Haitians eating pets. And sure enough, one of his many sycophantic followers, he has a great, large social media following, one of his sycophantic followers conjured up some video, gave him something to use. He produced a grainy video that he says proves this is happening. This is definitely happening. Haitians in Springfield are eating cats. Except actually, if you read the fine print, it was not Haitians in the video. It was some other group of immigrants from a totally different country. In Africa. Not even the same continent. I guess they're black, though, so, again, literally it was just black people. It also didn't take place in Springfield, Ohio. Once again, a different city in Ohio. So not Haitians, not in Springfield. The video was also from more than a year ago, so they conjured up some old video of somebody doing something. And, the video is kind of grainy. It's kind of pixelated. But if you look at it closely, what you see is a dead, skinned animal on a barbecue grill. It is almost certainly, upon close examination, a duck or a chicken with the feet still attached, the whole feet, as an immigrant population might cook it. and it is not a cat. So that's Chris Rufo's proof of Haitians eating cats is not Haitians not in Springfield eating not a cat. It's deeply contemptible. It earns my contempt, and it should earn your contempt too. These people, these J.D. Vance, Chris Rufo. And what I find especially concerning, really, is that someone like Rufo, his purpose in life is to conjure up panics, moral panics about specific vulnerable groups, about transgender people. They're coming to cut off your kid such and such. They're going to turn your kid trans in elementary school. They're going to make them the blah, blah, blah. He does it for immigrants. They're going to steal your pets. They're low IQ and they have diseases and crime and they're going to eat Fluffy. It's disgusting. And Chris Rufo does this. He creates these moral panics in service of conservative donors who pay him very handsomely to do it so that Republicans can win elections off the back of the panic and cut taxes for rich people and ban abortion. That's what they actually care about. They care about getting tax policy changed and they care about banning abortion, and they don't actually give a damn about any of the rest of it. They really don't. Donald Trump was not able to pass a single border bill while he was president. He was president for 4 years. He had unified control of government. He had a conservative Supreme Court and a conservative Senate and a Republican House, and he was the president. And you know how many border bills he passed? 0. He certainly took a lot of executive actions on the border, but he didn't pass any major legislative accomplishments, nothing permanent on the border. You know what he did do? His one major permanent piece of legislation that he passed was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was primarily, had a few good things in there actually, but primarily a tax cut for rich people. And the one big judicial thing that happened was that he appointed 3, I think, Supreme Court justices, all of whom opposed abortion and would overturn Roe v. Wade. And a few years after he appointed them, they did overturn Roe v. Wade. That's what actually gets accomplished. And they just use these moral panics about immigrants and trans people and whoever else they can scare you with, whatever else they can scare you with. What are they going to do to our children? What are they going to do to our pets? All of that is to scare people. They can accomplish their real objectives. And look, people like Chris Rufo are extremely cynical hacks. He knows exactly what he's doing. And it's funny, in previous years, when he wasn't as famous, he laid out the explicit strategy. He said, yes, I'm doing this. I'm going to create a moral panic. I'm going to hammer down the word woke and DEI, and I'm going to scare people with it so that we can elect more Republicans and get them to change tax policy. And he said this all very explicitly. And I think in recent years, he's gotten more guarded. He's learned to, show a poker face a little bit more. But they're very open about it. You can go back and read these interviews. It's just, it's hard to put into words how much this bothers me. The dirty black Haitian immigrants are going to steal your pets and eat them. That's essentially a blood libel on Haitians. It's so contemptible. And while Trump is a terrible person and will, repeat any lie that you give to him because he's got some form of dementia and he's just an incoherent babbler at this point, somehow J.D. Vance is worse because J.D. Vance knows what he's doing. Because he's doing this cynically. And he's cheered on by most of the conservative establishment. This is the establishment. This is the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate and a bunch of other people who are high up in the Republican Party and the conservative movement. And I don't know, man, it's a dark moment in American history. And it's really awful to think that there's, roughly a coin flip of a chance that this is the next presidential administration. It's just awful. I wasn't really looking forward to this episode, but sometimes look, you have to take a principled stand for what you believe in. Immigration is something that I believe in very strongly. Treating people equally, and kind of the principle that society should promote treating people equally, is something that I believe in. Non-racism is something that I believe in. And I believe these are all stances of the Center for New Liberalism and should be, the values that new liberals have. And so I don't want to be silent while this kind of vile racist lie is being hurled against immigrants. There have been times in the last, I don't know, the last 6 months, the last year, where I've been a little hesitant to talk about immigration too much because right now, we're in a presidential election and immigration is a tricky issue for Democrats. It can, in some circumstances, be a negative issue for Democrats. And look, frankly, we have an obligation to not just be correct in our beliefs, to not just hold values that are true, but we have an obligation also to be effective, to be strategic, to win. So there have been times when, some story about immigrants will come up and I'll kind of quietly let some commentary pass and not talk about it, knowing that the electorally smarter move is to focus on some other issue. This is not one of those times. This is beyond the pale. This is unacceptable. And I think that it's important for new liberals, neoliberals, whatever you want to call yourself, to stand up for immigrants who are being just unbelievably slandered here. It's also important because, look, there's only one party in America that is even remotely friendly to immigration. And this story is horrifying and completely untrue. And a core part of what I believe is that immigration is good. Immigration helps natives. It helps immigrants. It helps everyone. It builds a stronger society. It has so many benefits, economic and cultural and moral. Look, just about every argument for immigration works. There's a thing that happens sometimes where I describe my politics and someone asks, well, why are you aligned with the Democrats? After all, they do a lot of stuff that you don't like. And that's true. Sometimes Democrats do things that I am not a big fan of. I don't love Kamala Harris's price controls. I don't really like Joe Biden's plan for like national rent control, but those things can be worked around. This is why I align myself with the Democrats ultimately. This is bigotry run wild at an institutional level in the Republican Party. It is racism that is insidiously worming its way inside the core of Republican politics. Again, just to be very explicit about this is a rumor and a lie that started from a neo-Nazi group called Blood Tribe and a guy who uses a fake name that is essentially an ethnic slur. And they pushed these lies in the beginning. And now that same group, the neo-Nazi group, is openly celebrating in their forums and on their Telegram channels and their group chats. They're celebrating that Trump and Vance are on their side and that, we can declare victory because Donald Trump is one of us now. We are the ones who are giving ideas to Donald Trump. The neo-Nazis are very open about how successful they think they are. They're not hiding it. They're proud of it. And this has real consequences. Haitians in Springfield are now getting bomb threats. This is various churches and community organizations. I think we're up to something like 4 or 5 terroristic bomb threats against Springfield now since this has happened. This has only been happening like a week and a half. And somebody's going to get killed because of this eventually if things don't change. There is actual violence being promoted and it's horrible. And I have enough of a track record to say that any kind of violence is wrong here. And it's just, I don't understand how we got to this point in American politics. I want to close with kind of a message to any conservatives or conservative leaners or moderates who might be listening. There's a story that about the first time I experienced like real vile racism. and I had a pretty sheltered life. Look, I grew up as a middle class white kid with nothing spectacular about me. So I also grew up in a pretty multicultural high school, so where it just wasn't an issue most of the time. So I would see little instances here and there of whatever, but I didn't really have a lot of exposure to like turbo grade racism growing up. But I went on a road trip one time with a family member and with a family friend, I guess. And the family friend, we went up to Kentucky, and the family friend had some of their family up there, and their family was from Kentucky, and they lived there. And we were going to go see a football game. We were going to go see the Georgia versus Kentucky SEC football game. And I remember being shocked that when I was staying at this random person in Kentucky's house, kind of friend of a friend or family of a friend kind of a thing, that they were telling jokes about Obama being hanged from a tree in the White House lawn. And everybody laughed. Room full of white people. Everybody laughed. And I was kind of like frozen in silence. Like, what the hell is going on? And it was really disappointing for me because, there were multiple people telling those jokes and the family friend was laughing at them. And even my own family member who was there and who saw it, who I thought very highly of, didn't say anything. I had thought better of them, and nobody said anything. They either laughed or they just kind of didn't say anything. And there were jokes of, that I'm not going to repeat them on air, but they involved heavy use of the N word with a hard R and jokes about how you can hang up people from trees and blah blah blah. And this was the early years of the Obama presidency, like 2009 or 2010 or something like that. And I just remember being really really shocked, and like I didn't say anything because I was teenager still at that point, I think, and just shocked into silence. And I remember later kind of confronting the family member and family friend about, how could you not have said anything? That was horrible. Like, what the hell? And they seem embarrassed and, sorry, I guess. But it stuck with me that, this kind of stuff spreads because people don't speak up against it. And if you are a conservative, number one, if you believe this stuff, like to use language you might understand, like you need Jesus, man. You need to be saved. There is a sickness inside you. There is a poison inside you if you believe this immigrants are going to come steal your pets and eat your cats stuff. If you've been suckered into that, you need Jesus. You need to get right. And if you are one of the good conservatives who I hope does not believe this, my message to you is still, you need to be speaking up out against this, because be honest with yourself. If you're a conservative, you probably hang out with a lot of other conservative people, a lot of other people who are into Republican politics or who watch Fox News a lot. How many of them do you think believe this kind of stuff? How many of your friends would see this on Twitter or on an email chain or on Fox News? How many of them would believe it and repeat it uncritically? Jokes about how the Haitians are stealing Fluffy and going to butcher our cats. Probably more than you're comfortable with. And probably because nobody like you actually bothers them when they do it, speaks up against it. There's a poison inside your movement. And if you don't exercise, if you don't get it out, if you don't get that poison out somehow, it will poison everything you believe. There will be no conservative movement that is not racist. If you would like there to be a conservative movement that does not have neo-Nazis as one of the main alliance partners, you need to make that happen. And look, I don't envy the position you're in, because it's a shitty position to be in, to be a conservative with actual principles. But that's where you are. I want to close with something I don't do very often, with a quote from a politician I don't actually like always, but who had something really valuable to say here. Ronald Reagan, 1980, was giving his acceptance speech. He had just won the Republican nomination. He was at the Republican National Convention, and he was giving his acceptance speech. A few months after this, he would become president for the first time. And Reagan, at the end of his speech, at the end of his prepared remarks, actually went off topic, went off speech, off script, I guess. And he said this: "I've thought of something that is not part of my speech, and I'm worried over whether I should do it. Can we doubt that only a divine providence placed this land, this island of freedom, here as a refuge for all those people in the world who yearn to breathe freely? Jews and Christians who endure persecution behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union, the boat people of Southeast Asia, of Cuba, and of Haiti, the victims of drought and famine in Africa, the freedom fighters of Afghanistan, and our own countrymen held in captivity." In his acceptance speech, accepting the nomination for president, Ronald Reagan himself called out the need to accept migrants from Haiti. And sure, he wasn't a perfect president. He actually restricted immigration somewhat, but as a value, he articulated as a core value that America is a place for refugees, that America is a shining beacon on the hill that can act as a refuge for all those people in the world who yearn to breathe free. And he specifically called out Haitians. And 44 years later, the vice presidential candidate of that same party is saying, well, I know that it's a lie that Haitians eat cats, but I'm going to keep telling it anyway because it gets me attention, and maybe you'll pay attention to the rest of the stuff I'm saying. It's pretty much verbatim from J.D. Vance, by the way, acknowledging that it's a lie, but saying, well, it's useful, so I'm not ashamed of telling it. It's useful because maybe now you'll pay attention to the problems I'm highlighting, now that I've said this lie. We have to get back to a saner form of politics. If you're a conservative listening to this, and I know I have some, you have to be one of the ones that does it. Because look, America is a country with a lot of conservatives in it. Conservatives are going to sometimes be in government. There's no history of the United States for the next 50 years where just Democrats win every election for 50 years. That's not going to happen. So what it means is that we need a sane, rational, non-racist form of conservative politics. We need that in this country, and we don't have it right now. So that is my message for the episode, that, we have to stand up for our values. I'm a new liberal, a neoliberal. I will stand up that immigration is good and that this kind of attack on immigrants is a vile, disgusting lie. And I hope that others will do the same, whether you're also a new liberal, whether you're a conservative who has principles. We need more people willing to stand up and say this kind of stuff because there's too much poison in our politics, and we're going down a very dark road right now. Thank you for listening, everyone. Sorry this episode wasn't as fun and, wonky as some of the other ones, but important stuff, unfortunately. I always appreciate everyone who listens to the podcast, and I will catch you at the next one.